The Andromeda research station floated silently in the void of space like a giant metal flower with its multiple arms reaching out into the darkness. Dr. Velkara pressed her six-fingered hand against the observation deck's transparent aluminum window and stared at the strange object that had appeared on their long-range sensors 3 days ago. The alien archaeologist's purple skin seemed to shimmer under the station's artificial lighting as she watched the massive shape slowly tumbling. In the distance, Commander Zexther approached from behind with his heavy footsteps echoing through the corridor. His species stood nearly 8 feet tall with thick gray hide that looked like living stone. The Vortanian Empire had sent him to oversee this discovery, and he was not pleased with what he saw through the window. That thing looks like someone welded scrap metal together in their backyard, Zexther said with disgust clear in his voice. His translator device converted his growling native language into standard Galactic so that Dr. Velkara could understand him. Are you certain this vessel is worth our time and resources? Dr. Velkara turned away from the window and looked up at the towering commander. Her large black eyes reflected the lights of the research station as she spoke. The initial scans show that this ship is at least 2,000 years old. The metallurgy suggests it comes from a species we have never encountered before. That alone makes it valuable for study. The research station had been established in this remote sector specifically to search for artifacts from extinct civilizations. The Galactic Archaeological Council funded expeditions like this one to better understand the history of spacefaring species. Most discoveries turned out to be fragments of hull plating or damaged computer cores that told little about their creators. This find was different because the entire ship appeared to be intact. Lieutenant Jake Morrison stood at the far end of the observation deck reviewing technical specifications on his tablet. The human officer had been assigned to the research station 6 months ago as part of humanity's cultural exchange program with the Galactic Council. Most aliens still viewed humans as the newest and least experienced species in galactic civilization. Jake kept his opinions to himself, but something about the derelict ship bothered him in ways he could not explain. The vessel measured nearly 300 meters in length and looked nothing like the graceful starships that filled spaceports throughout the galaxy, where most modern ships featured smooth curves and artistic design elements. This ancient craft appeared to be built from rectangular blocks of metal welded together without concern for appearance. Thick armor plating covered every surface and massive weapon emplacements jutted out from the hull like mechanical growths. "Prepare the shuttle for departure," Commander Zexther ordered his aide. "I want to see this primitive vessel up close before we waste more time studying it." The research team gathered in the shuttle bay 30 minutes later. Dr. Velkara brought her archaeological scanning equipment while her assistant Dr. Morthick carried containers for any artifacts they might find. Commander Zexther wore full combat armor despite the fact that the derelict ship showed no signs of active systems or life support. Jake Morrison joined the team at the last moment after receiving permission from his human supervisors back on Earth. The shuttle approached the ancient warship slowly, with its pilot carefully matching the derelict's tumbling motion. Up close, the vessel looked even more primitive and brutish. Thick plates of dark metal showed scoring from countless impacts, and several sections appeared to have been repaired with patches of different materials. The hull design followed no aesthetic principles that any of the alien team members could recognize. "Look at those weapon systems," Commander Zexther said with amusement in his voice. They appeared to be simple kinetic projectile launchers. What species would build weapons that fire chunks of metal when energy systems are so much more efficient? Dr. Velkara adjusted her scanning equipment as the shuttle matched airlocks with the ancient ship. Perhaps they lacked the technology for proper energy weapons. Many primitive civilizations go through a projectile weapon phase before developing more sophisticated systems. The airlock cycled through its sequence and the team entered the derelict vessel. Emergency lighting flickered to life as their movement triggered automatic systems that still functioned after centuries in space. The corridors were wider than those found on most alien ships, and the ceiling height accommodated beings much taller than the average galactic citizen. Everything appeared to be built with durability rather than comfort in mind. Jake Morrison ran his hand along the corridor wall and felt the thick metal plating beneath layers of what looked like ceramic coating. The construction reminded him of something from Earth's military history, but he could not place exactly what. The corridors led them toward what appeared to be the ship's central hub where multiple passages intersected. The internal layout makes no sense, Dr. Morthick complained as he struggled with his equipment through the narrow passages. Why would any species design a ship with so many redundant pathways and backup systems? It is terribly inefficient, Commander. Zexler examined a wall panel that contained what looked like manual controls for various ship systems. Everything about this vessel suggests its builders had no understanding of proper starship design. Look at these crude mechanical switches. Instead of neural interface controls, the team made their way toward the bridge which occupied the ship's forward section. The command center was larger than expected, with multiple stations arranged in a semicircle facing a main view screen. Each station appeared to be designed for individual operation rather than the linked consciousness systems used by advanced species. Thick armor plating surrounded the bridge and multiple backup systems were visible throughout the compartment. Dr. Velkara set up her archaeological scanner and began recording detailed measurements of everything in the bridge area. The scanning data would be transmitted back to the research station where computers would analyze the information and create three-dimensional models for further study. She paid particular attention to what appeared to be the captain's station, which sat in the center of the command area. I am detecting organic residue in several areas, she announced to the team. It appears the crew members were carbon-based life forms similar to many current galactic species. The atmosphere mixture was primarily nitrogen and oxygen, which is common among older civilizations. Jake Morrison examined the weapon control stations with growing unease. The targeting systems and fire control mechanisms looked familiar in ways that made him uncomfortable. The more he studied the bridge layout, the more convinced he became that this ship represented something important that the alien team was missing completely. The exploration continued for 3 hours as the team documented every accessible area of the ancient vessel. Commander Zexler grew increasingly dismissive of their discovery as each new section revealed more of what he considered primitive and inefficient design choices. The ship's creators had clearly prioritized function over form and durability, over elegance in ways that seemed wasteful to modern sensibilities. As the team prepared to return to the research station, Jake Morrison took one final look around the bridge area. Something caught his eye near the captain's station, and he bent down to examine it more closely. Partially hidden beneath centuries of dust and debris, he found a small metallic object that made his blood run cold. The item was clearly of human origin, and its presence on this ancient warship raised questions that could change everything the galaxy thought they knew about humanity's place among the stars. The great assembly hall on Nexus Prime stretched out like a massive dome beneath the artificial sky that showed the homeworlds of 12 different species. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for this emergency session of the Galactic Council, and the air hummed with conversations in dozens of languages. Ambassador Tisara of the Celestial Federation stood at the central podium with her elegant blue skin glowing softly under the chamber's lights. The holographic display above the podium showed the ancient derelict warship from multiple angles as Tisara began her presentation. Her voice carried clearly through the translation systems that allowed all species to understand each other during these important meetings. The images rotated slowly so that every council member could see the crude construction and primitive weapon systems of the discovered vessel. Senator Cortex of the Silicon Collective was the first to respond, and his mechanical voice buzzed with electronic laughter. His species had evolved beyond biological form centuries ago and now existed as pure consciousness within crystalline bodies. The idea of using such primitive materials for starship construction seemed especially amusing to beings who could reshape matter at the molecular level. This flying scrap heap represents everything wrong with aggressive militaristic species, Cortex announced to the assembly. Look at those crude projectile weapons and that excessive armor plating. The builders clearly had no understanding of proper engineering or aesthetic design principles. High Chancellor Morgeth of the Ethereal Dominion raised his forearms in a gesture of dismissal. His species communicated through color changes in their translucent skin, and the translation systems converted these patterns into spoken words for other council members. The Chancellor's skin shifted through several shades of contempt as he examined the holographic images. My technical advisors informed me that those primitive projectile throwers would not even scratch modern shield systems, Morgeth stated with obvious disdain. The energy requirements for those kinetic weapons must have been enormous compared to our current plasma and particle beam technologies. What species would waste resources on such inefficient systems? The council chamber filled with sounds of agreement and amusement from representatives of various species. The Vortanian ambassador slammed his massive fist on his desk and declared that his people had built better warships 3,000 years ago. The delicate insect-like delegates from the hive worlds clicked their mandibles in patterns that indicated extreme mockery. Ambassador Lisa Carter sat in the observer section reserved for species with provisional council membership. Humans had only been granted this limited status 5 years ago after first contact with galactic civilization. Her species was still considered too new and inexperienced to have full voting rights in council decisions. Lisa watched the proceedings with growing concern as the alien representatives continued their ridicule of what she increasingly suspected might be connected to humanity. Dr. Helen Brooks sat beside Lisa Carter and took careful notes on everything the alien archaeologists had discovered about the derelict vessel. As Earth's leading expert on pre-space flight, human military technology, she had been brought to Nexus Prime specifically to observe this presentation. The more she heard about the ship's design and construction, the more convinced she became that something important was being overlooked. The Nexari representative stood up from his crystalline seat and spoke in musical tones that the translators converted into standard galactic. His people were known for creating the most beautiful starships in the galaxy with organic curves and living metal that could adapt to different situations. The idea of building a vessel from dead materials welded together seemed barbaric to his artistic sensibilities. This ancient relic proves that some species never learned the harmony between form and function, the Nexari delegate announced. Our ancestors would have been ashamed to create something so ugly and brutish. Perhaps it is better that whoever built this monstrosity is no longer around to embarrass themselves further. Laughter echoed through the assembly hall as more representatives joined in the mockery. The Plasma Lords demonstrated holographic projections of their own elegant warships for comparison, while the Crystal Empire showed technical specifications, proving how much more efficient their energy weapons were compared to the primitive kinetic systems found on the derelict. Ambassador Tisara called for order and continued her presentation with details about the ship's internal structure. The archaeological team had documented redundant life support systems, multiple backup power generators, and armor plating thick enough to withstand direct hits from asteroid impacts. To the assembled aliens, these features represented wasteful over-engineering rather than practical military design. The vessel appears to have been designed for extended combat operations without support from base facilities, Tisara explained. The crew quarters include storage for months of supplies, and the medical bay contains surgical equipment for treating severe battle injuries. Everything suggests a species that expected to fight long campaigns far from home. This information only increased the mockery from the council members. The idea of building warships for prolonged conflict seemed wasteful and aggressive to species that had learned to solve disputes through diplomacy or brief decisive actions. Several representatives expressed relief that whatever civilization had built the derelict was no longer around to threaten galactic peace with their militaristic attitudes. Dr. Helen Brooks raised her hand and requested permission to address the council. As a representative of a provisional member species, she had no official speaking rights but could ask questions during designated periods. Lisa Carter supported her request, and after some discussion, the council agreed to hear her comments. Helen Brooks stood up and walked to the secondary podium reserved for observers and technical experts. Her human appearance drew curious looks from alien representatives, who were still becoming accustomed to seeing her species at council meetings. She activated her own holographic display and began showing technical diagrams that she had prepared based on the archaeological data. I would like to request permission for human experts to conduct our own examination of this derelict vessel, Brooks announced to the assembly. My analysis of the construction techniques and design philosophy suggests that this ship may be more significant than initially believed. Senator Cordick's mechanical laughter filled the chamber again. What could your young species possibly discover that experienced archaeologists have missed? He asked with obvious condescension. Humans have barely mastered interstellar travel, and you think you can understand ancient military technology better than civilizations with millions of years of experience. The other council members murmured agreement, and several made comments about human arrogance and naivety. Lisa Carter felt her face flush with embarrassment, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. The humans were still newcomers to galactic society and could not afford to antagonize more established species over what might turn out to be nothing. High Chancellor Morgeth consulted with his advisors before responding to the human request. His skin shifted through colors that indicated amused tolerance as he considered whether to grant permission for human involvement in the archaeological study. The idea that such a young species might contribute anything meaningful to the investigation seemed highly unlikely. Very well, Morgeth finally announced. We will allow human researchers to examine this worthless relic. Perhaps handling ancient scrap metal will provide valuable experience for your developing archaeological programs. Consider it an educational opportunity. More laughter rippled through the assembly as the council members voted to grant the human request. The motion passed easily since most representatives viewed it as harmless busy work that would keep the newest species occupied, while real scientists conducted proper research. Lisa Carter thanked the council for their consideration and promised that human experts would not interfere with the primary investigation. As the session concluded and representatives began filing out of the assembly hall, Dr. Helen Brooks gathered her research materials with hands that trembled slightly. She had not shared her growing suspicions with the council, but the evidence was becoming difficult to ignore. If she was correct about the derelict's origins, then the galaxy was about to discover something that would change everything they thought they knew about human history and capabilities. Captain Ben Walker stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the docking platform of the Andromeda Research Station with his team of human specialists following close behind. The artificial gravity felt strange after the long journey from Earth, and he took a moment to adjust to the station's recycled air. His military background had prepared him for many situations, but leading an archaeological expedition into potentially dangerous territory was something new. Dr. Helen Brooks carried 3 cases of specialized scanning equipment that she had designed specifically for analyzing ancient human artifacts. Her years of studying pre-spaceflight military technology had given her unique insights into how early human engineers approached problems of warfare and survival. She suspected that this derelict vessel would prove those insights correct in ways that might shock the galactic community. Systems analyst Ryan Clark checked his portable computer systems as they walked through the station corridors toward their assigned quarters. His expertise in recovering data from damaged storage devices had made him invaluable to archaeological teams throughout human space. The alien archaeologists had already declared the derelict's computer systems completely corrupted, but Ryan had successfully recovered information from systems that other experts considered hopeless. Weapons expert Amanda Lee observed everything around her with the trained eye of someone who had spent decades studying how different species designed their military hardware. The alien crew members they passed in the corridors carried energy weapons that looked elegant but impractical for sustained combat. Their ship designs prioritized appearance over function in ways that would get soldiers killed in real battles. Lieutenant Jake Morrison met the team at their quarters and briefed them on everything the alien archaeological team had discovered. So far? His expression remained carefully neutral, but Helen Brooks could see the tension in his shoulders as he described the derelict's construction and armament. Something about this ancient vessel had clearly disturbed the young officer in ways he was not yet ready to discuss. The alien team has focused mainly on the bridge and engineering sections, Jake explained as he led them toward the shuttle bay. They have avoided the crew quarters and personal areas because they consider those spaces unimportant for understanding the ship's technology. That might work in our favor since those areas could contain the most revealing information, the human. Team Shuttle approached the derelict warship 6 hours later with Captain Walker personally handling the piloting duties. His military training had included boarding operations on hostile vessels, and he wanted to maintain full control during their initial approach. The ancient ship's hull showed even more damage up close with sections that looked like they had been deliberately patched during combat operations, Amanda Lee pointed out weapon impacts and armor repairs that the alien team had completely missed during their initial survey. "Look at those blast patterns on the starboard hull," she said while reviewing the external camera feeds. "Those are not random impacts from space debris. This ship was in multiple firefights and kept fighting even after taking severe damage." The airlock connection went smoothly and the team entered the derelict through the same passage the aliens had used 3 days earlier. Emergency lighting activated automatically and revealed corridors that looked familiar to anyone who had served aboard human military vessels. The construction philosophy was unmistakably human even though the technology was far more advanced than anything in current service. Ryan Clark immediately began scanning for active computer systems while Helen Brooks set up her archaeological equipment in the main corridor. Her sensors detected trace elements and manufacturing signatures that could only come from Earth-based industrial processes. The metallurgy matched theoretical projections for what human industry might have achieved given several more centuries of development. "I am picking up data storage devices in multiple locations throughout the ship," Ryan announced as his scanners identified intact computer cores. The alien team missed them because they are using storage formats that do not match current galactic standards. These systems appear to use quantum crystalline matrices that are far more advanced than what we have today. Captain Walker led Amanda Lee toward the weapons control centers while Helen Brooks and Jake Morrison headed for the crew quarters. The personal areas had been sealed behind blast doors during the alien investigation, but Jake had obtained override codes from the research station's database. The doors opened with a grinding sound that suggested their mechanisms had not been used for centuries. The first crew cabin they entered contained personal items that made Helen Brooks gasp with recognition. Family photographs showed groups of humans in military uniforms standing in front of what looked like colonial settlements. The faces were clearly human, but the clothing and equipment suggested a level of technology that Earth had not yet achieved during its own colonial period. Jake Morrison found a footlocker containing items that removed any doubt about the ship's origins. A baseball signed by players from the new Brooklyn Colonials sat beside a Christian cross and a small American flag made from synthetic materials. The manufacturing techniques were far advanced, but the cultural artifacts were unmistakably from human civilization. "This ship is definitely human-built," Jake said quietly as he examined more personal items from the crew quarters. "But it represents a level of technology that is centuries ahead of anything we achieved before joining galactic civilization." How is that possible? Helen Brooks was asking herself the same question as she discovered more evidence of advanced human engineering throughout the vessel. The crew had left behind technical manuals written in archaic English and maintenance logs that described repairs using materials that current human industry could not produce. Everything suggested a human civilization that had achieved interstellar capability far earlier than official records indicated. Ryan Clark made contact with the team through their communication systems with excitement clear in his voice. "I have successfully accessed one of the main computer cores," he announced. "The data includes captain's logs, crew records, and operational reports dating back over 2,000 years. This ship is called the USS Defiance, and it was part of something called the Deep Space Defense Fleet. The team gathered in the ship's restored computer center, where Ryan had managed to bring several display screens back online. The recovered data painted a picture of human space exploration that contradicted everything the galactic community believed about humanity's development. The USS Defiance had been built during Earth's first expansion into deep space when human colonies were under attack by hostile alien forces. Amanda Lee studied the tactical reports and battle logs with growing amazement. These crew members were not explorers or peaceful colonists, she said as she read through combat records. They were professional soldiers fighting a war against alien species that attacked human settlements without provocation. The weapon systems I examined earlier were designed specifically for ship-to-ship combat against energy-shielded opponents. The captain's logs revealed that the USS Defiance and her sister ships had fought desperate battles against overwhelming odds to protect human civilian populations. The enemy they faced used advanced energy weapons and shielding that made conventional human weapons ineffective. In response, human engineers had developed kinetic weapons that could punch through energy barriers and armor systems that could withstand sustained bombardment. Helen Brooks realized that the alien archaeological team had completely misunderstood what they were examining. The redundant systems and heavy construction were not signs of primitive engineering but evidence of mature military design philosophy. Every aspect of the ship's construction reflected lessons learned from actual combat experience against technologically superior enemies. We need to document everything we can before reporting our findings to the Galactic Council. Captain Walker decided after reviewing all the evidence they had gathered. This discovery is going to change how every species in the galaxy views humanity and our place in their civilization. We have to be absolutely certain of our facts before we make any announcements. The team spent the next 12 hours systematically recording every piece of evidence they could find aboard the ancient warship. The story that emerged from their investigation would force the galactic community to completely reassess their understanding of human history and capabilities in ways that none of them were prepared to handle. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened just 2 days after Captain Ben Walker transmitted his team's initial findings to Nexus Prime. The Great Assembly Hall buzzed with confused conversations as representatives tried to understand why the humans had requested such an urgent meeting. Ambassador Lisa Carter stood at the central podium with her hands steady despite the nervous energy that filled the chamber. Senator Cortex of the Silicon Collective spoke first with his mechanical voice carrying a tone of annoyed curiosity. Ambassador Carter, your species has called this emergency session to discuss that worthless derelict we allowed you to examine. Surely you do not expect us to believe that your inexperienced archaeologists discovered something that our experts missed. High Chancellor Morges' translucent skin shifted through colors of skeptical amusement as he addressed the human delegation. We granted your request for educational purposes only. What could your young civilization possibly have learned from examining ancient scrap metal that would require disrupting council business? Lisa Carter activated the holographic display system and began showing detailed images of the artifacts her team had discovered aboard the USS Defiance. Personal photographs of human families appeared above the assembly, followed by military insignia and cultural items that could only have originated from Earth. The alien representatives fell silent as they realized the implications of what they were seeing. Captain Walker stepped forward to address the council with his military bearing evident in every movement. His voice remained calm and professional as he delivered information that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The assembled aliens listened with growing disbelief as he explained that the primitive warship they had mocked was actually a human vessel from humanity's earliest spacefaring period. The ship we have designated USS Defiance was built by human engineers approximately 2,800 years ago, Walker announced to the stunned assembly. Our analysis of the construction techniques and materials confirms that this vessel represents advanced human technology from a period that predates our official first contact with galactic civilization by nearly 3 millennia. The council chamber erupted in shocked conversations as representatives struggled to process this revelation. The idea that humans had been spacefaring for thousands of years contradicted everything they thought they knew about the newest species in galactic society. Several delegates demanded proof while others accused the humans of fabricating evidence. To gain political advantage, Dr. Helen Brooks took her position at the podium and began presenting detailed technical analysis of the ship's design and construction. Her holographic displays showed internal components that used manufacturing techniques unknown to current galactic civilization. The metallurgy and engineering approaches were uniquely human but represented a level of technological sophistication that surpassed many current species. The redundant systems that you dismissed as inefficient are actually sophisticated fail-safes that allow the vessel to continue operating even after sustaining massive damage, Brooks explained as she highlighted various ship components. The armor plating you considered primitive is composed of layered materials that can absorb and redistribute impact energy more effectively than modern shielding systems. Commander Zexter of the Vortanian Empire stood up from his massive chair, with his stone-like features showing confusion and concern. His species prided themselves on military prowess and the idea that ancient humans had built superior warships challenged their fundamental beliefs about galactic military hierarchy. He demanded to examine the evidence personally before accepting such extraordinary claims. Amanda Lee began her presentation on the ship's weapons systems with detailed analysis that silenced the mocking laughter that had filled previous sessions. The kinetic weapons that aliens had dismissed as primitive projectile throwers were actually sophisticated railguns and mass drivers designed to penetrate energy shields that would deflect more conventional weapon systems. These weapons were specifically engineered to fight against opponents using advanced energy shielding. Lee explained as her holographs showed weapon test results. The magnetic acceleration systems can fire projectiles at velocities that exceed anything in current galactic arsenals. The power requirements you considered wasteful actually allow for sustained bombardment that can overwhelm defensive systems through sheer persistence. The Nexari representative's musical voice carried tones of disbelief as he questioned the human findings. His people had created the most advanced starships in the galaxy, and the suggestion that primitive humans had built superior vessels thousands of years ago seemed impossible to accept. He demanded independent verification of all human claims before the Council would consider changing their assessment. Ryan Clark stepped forward with data cores recovered from the USS Defiance and began displaying captain's logs that painted a picture of humanity's forgotten past. The recovered records described battles against aggressive alien species that had attacked human colonies without provocation or warning. The names of enemy forces mentioned in the logs matched historical records of several species whose ancestors had conquered territory through military expansion. The USS Defiance was not an exploration vessel or peaceful transport, Clark announced as he showed combat reports from the ship's database. This warship and others like it were built specifically to defend human civilian populations against hostile alien forces that viewed humanity as a threat to their expansion plans. The assembly hall fell completely silent as the implications of these revelations became clear. Several council members recognized references to their own species' ancient military campaigns in the recovered logs. The humans their ancestors had fought were not the peaceful newcomers they had welcomed into galactic civilization, but descendants of warriors who had earned their survival through superior military engineering and tactical thinking. Ambassador Tessara of the Celestial Federation requested access to the original data files for independent analysis by her government's technical experts. The idea that human starship design philosophy was based on actual combat experience against galactic-level opponents explained many things that had puzzled alien military observers about human tactical doctrine and equipment preferences. Jake Morrison concluded the presentation by revealing the most disturbing information from the captain's logs. The final entries described the USS Defiance's crew making the ultimate sacrifice to protect evacuating civilian transports from overwhelming enemy forces. The ship had been deliberately rammed into an alien battle station to buy time for non-combatant vessels to escape to safety. The crew of this vessel gave their lives to ensure that human civilization would survive to eventually reach the stars again, Morrison said as he read the final log entry. Captain Sarah Martinez and her crew of 147 officers died defending people they had never met so that humanity would have a future among the stars. The revelation that humans had not only survived their first contact with hostile aliens, but had done so through superior military technology and sacrifice, changed everything the Council thought they understood about human nature. The peaceful newcomers who had joined galactic civilization were actually descendants of warriors whose ancestors had fought and won battles against species that current aliens still feared in their historical records, High Chancellor Morgeth consulted with his advisors before addressing the human delegation. His skin displayed colors of reluctant respect as he acknowledged that the evidence presented was too extensive and detailed to be fabricated. The implications for galactic politics and military balance were staggering if humans possessed this level of forgotten military heritage. The Galactic Council accepts your findings and formally acknowledges that human civilization has spacefaring experience that predates our previous estimates by several millennia, Morgeth announced. This discovery requires a complete reassessment of humanity's status within galactic society and the historical record of early interstellar conflicts. The session concluded with a mandate for complete archaeological investigation of the USS Defiance and authorization for human teams to search for additional evidence of their species' ancient spacefaring activities. The galaxy would never view humanity the same way again now that they understood the warrior heritage that lay beneath their peaceful exterior. 3 weeks after the shocking revelation at the Galactic Council, Commander Zexter found himself standing in the restored bridge of the USS Defiance with a completely different perspective on what he was seeing. The control stations that had seemed primitive and crude during his first visit now appeared to be masterpieces of practical engineering, designed by people who understood the realities of sustained combat operations. The Vortanian commander ran his massive stone-like fingers across the captain's chair where Sarah Martinez had made her final decisions nearly 3,000 years ago. His species had built their reputation on military prowess and conquest, but the tactical thinking that created this ancient human warship represented approaches to warfare that his people had never considered. Dr. Velcara worked alongside human archaeologists to establish a permanent research station within the derelict vessel. Her earlier dismissive attitude had been replaced by genuine scientific curiosity as she began to understand the sophisticated design philosophy behind every aspect of the ship's construction. The redundant systems and heavy armor that had seemed wasteful were actually evidence of mature military engineering based on real combat experience. The alien archaeologist activated her recording equipment and began documenting the weapon control stations with help from Amanda Lee. The human weapons expert explained how each system had been designed to operate independently so that battle damage to one area would not compromise the ship's entire offensive capability. This approach to weapons design was completely different from the integrated systems used by most galactic civilizations. Your ancestors built this ship to keep fighting even when everything was going wrong, Velcara observed as she examined the multiple backup power systems. Most species design their vessels assuming that superior technology will prevent serious damage from occurring. Humans apparently assumed that serious damage was inevitable and planned. Accordingly, Amanda Lee nodded as she reviewed the tactical systems that had allowed the USS Defiance to engage multiple enemy vessels simultaneously. Human military doctrine has always emphasized persistence and redundancy over elegance. We build systems that can take punishment and keep working because we learned early that warfare rarely goes according to plan. Captain Ben Walker met with senior council representatives in the station's main conference room to discuss the implications of their discovery for current galactic security arrangements. The revelation that humanity possessed advanced military heritage had forced every species to reconsider their defense strategies and alliance structures. Some aliens viewed this development as a threat while others saw it as an opportunity. Senator Cortex of the Silicon Collective had traveled personally to the research station to examine the evidence and speak with human military experts. His mechanical form hummed with electronic activity as he processed the strategic implications of humanity's revealed capabilities. The idea that his people had been underestimating human potential for 5 years was deeply troubling. "Your species has been remarkably patient with our condescending attitudes," Quartix admitted to Captain Walker during their private meeting. "We treated humans as naive newcomers who needed guidance and protection when you are actually descendants of warriors who fought galactic-scale conflicts and won." High Chancellor Mordrith arrived at the research station with a full diplomatic escort and immediately requested a complete briefing on everything the human team had discovered. His translucent skin displayed colors of cautious respect as he toured the ancient warship and listened to explanations of its various systems. The implications for galactic politics were enormous if other human vessels from this period still existed. Ryan Clark had made significant progress in recovering additional data from the ship's computer cores, and the information he found painted an even more complex picture of humanity's ancient spacefaring activities. The USS Defiance had been part of a larger fleet that protected human colonies scattered across multiple star systems. References in the logs suggested that dozens of similar vessels had been built during what humans called the Dark Century. The logs mentioned sister ships with names like USS Perseverance, USS Determination, and USS Endurance, Clark reported to the assembled aliens and humans. These vessels were apparently designed to operate independently for months at a time while defending human territory against coordinated alien attacks. The tactical reports describe battles against opponents who had significant technological advantages. Dr. Helen Brooks discovered technical manuals that described human shipbuilding capabilities during the ancient period that far exceeded what current human civilization could achieve. The manufacturing processes and material science represented centuries of advancement beyond what Earth had accomplished before joining galactic society. Somehow humanity had achieved this level of technology and then lost it during the Dark Century. Jake Morrison spent hours in the ship's memorial room where the crew had honored fallen comrades from previous battles. The walls contained names of thousands of humans who had died defending colonies and civilian populations during the early expansion period. Each name represented someone who had given their life so that humanity could survive to eventually reach the stars again. The memorial room also contained strategic assessments that revealed the scope of the conflict humanity had faced during their first attempt at interstellar expansion. The enemy forces described in these documents included species that several current council members recognized as their own ancestors. The humans had been fighting for survival against opponents who viewed them as a threat to established galactic order. Ambassador Lisa Carter returned to the research station with new orders from Earth's government authorizing full cooperation with alien investigators. The discovery of humanity's military heritage had created both opportunities and dangers that required careful diplomatic management. Some species were offering enhanced alliance terms while others were quietly strengthening their defensive positions. The most significant development came when long-range sensors detected artificial objects in nearby star systems that matched the construction signatures of human vessels from the same period as the USS Defiance. The implications were staggering because it suggested that other ancient human warships might still be drifting in space, waiting to be discovered. Commander Zexter volunteered to lead joint expeditions to locate and examine these additional vessels. His military background and newfound respect for human engineering made him the ideal candidate to evaluate whatever they might find. The Vortanian Empire was also interested in studying human tactical doctrine to improve their own military capabilities. The research team discovered that the USS Defiance contained detailed star charts showing the locations of human colonies and military installations that had existed during the ancient expansion period. Many of these systems were now inhabited by other species who had no idea that humans had been there first. The political implications of this information were potentially explosive. Dr. Velcara made a formal request to establish permanent archaeological programs dedicated to studying human military history from the pre-contact period. Her species wanted to understand how humans had developed such effective military technology without access to galactic knowledge networks. The engineering approaches used by ancient humans could benefit current galactic civilization. As the research continued and more evidence emerged, it became clear that humanity's peaceful integration into galactic society had been possible only because they had forgotten their own military heritage. The species that welcomed humans as harmless newcomers would have reacted very differently if they had known about vessels like the USS Defiance. The final discovery came when Ryan Clark successfully decoded the ship's strategic database and found references to weapons and defensive systems that current galactic civilization could not duplicate. The ancient humans had developed military technologies that were still beyond the capabilities of species with millions of years of spacefaring experience. Ambassador Lisa Carter addressed the Galactic Council one final time to discuss the long-term implications of their discovery. She explained that humanity had lost much of their early spacefaring knowledge during the Dark Century, but retained the fundamental attitudes and approaches that had made their ancestors successful warriors. The galaxy would need to adjust to the reality that humans were not the peaceful newcomers they appeared to be. The story concluded with Jake Morrison standing alone in the USS Defiance's restored bridge reading the final log entries left by Captain Martinez and her crew. Their sacrifice had allowed human civilization to survive and eventually return to space, but the cost of that survival was measured in thousands of lives and centuries of lost knowledge. The galaxy was only beginning to understand what humanity had endured to earn their place among the stars.